When the House passed the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act last week, Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher, who voted against it, said it takes from the poor to give tax cuts to the rich. I'm Craig Cohen. Today on Houston Matters, we hear more from Congresswoman Fletcher and welcome your questions for her, too, at talk@houstonmatters.org or 713-440-8870.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Also this hour, from a study suggesting AI isn't all that after all, to Texas Monthly redeeming Houston barbecue, this week's non-expert panel weighs in on intrigues in the news on the good, the bad, and the ugly. Plus, our Joshua Zinn chats with Bob Simpson, retiring founder and artistic director of the Houston Chamber Choir, ahead of his final concert this weekend. We'll start with a news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us. This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Good morning. Coming up this hour, a new study suggests AI may not be all businesses think it is. We discuss on this week's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Also ahead, a final concert for the founder of the Houston Chamber Choir. But first, last week, the U.S. House passed by one vote a budget reconciliation bill dubbed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Included in it are a variety of tax cuts, paid for in part by cuts to funding of SNAP, the federal food aid program, provisions that would lead to Medicaid cuts, and the trigger of automatic cuts to Medicare. The bill also increases spending for the Defense Department and for border security. Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher was among those who voted against it. She represents the 7th Congressional District in Texas, covering portions of southwest Houston and Harris County, along with some of the northern side of suburban Fort Bend County. She's here with us now. Congresswoman, good morning.
Good morning, Craig. I'm glad to be with you.
As we chat about that budget bill and other topics, we welcome your questions for Congresswoman Fletcher. You may call or text us at 713-440-8870. You can email us at talk@houstonmatters.org. Now, look, the bill could undergo changes in the Senate as they're contemplating it, but if it takes effect as it is, what do you see as the biggest impacts for Houstonians?
Well, thanks so much for asking, Craig. There are a ton of impacts for Houstonians, and I think it's really important for folks to understand that there are huge problems with this bill, both in process and in substance. The bottom line is that this bill takes from the poor to give tax cuts to the rich. And it does it in a number of ways that you outlined. And I think the biggest challenges that we're going to see here in Houston are absolutely challenges to people's access to health care and a huge impact on our healthcare system across the board, which people are already concerned enough that health care is unaffordable and inaccessible. And in Texas, we rank 50th in terms of access to health care of all the states in the District of Columbia. So we really have a lot of challenges here already. And what you see in the bill, it does a few things. The things that came through my committee relate to health care and energy, as well as you mentioned the cuts to SNAP, formerly called food stamps, $290 billion removed from food assistance. And the estimates from the Congressional Budget Office are that 11 million people will go hungry, including children and seniors and people with disabilities. Here, that's going to have a huge impact in our community. And it has a ripple effect. If you can't qualify for some of those benefits, you might not qualify for free and reduced lunch at schools. We're going to see hungrier kids and people in our community and in communities across the country. And when it comes to health care, there are a couple of huge pieces. One are the cuts to Medicaid. And what you're hearing, and what I heard my colleagues on the other side of the aisle describing, was that they were just removing people who they thought didn't deserve to get Medicaid, shouldn't get Medicaid, and that they were just instituting some reasonable requirements. Every bit of evidence, including what we have done in Texas in the past, shows that the kinds of red tape that they've instituted in this bill to require people to recertify their eligibility to prove that they're working or looking for a job removes eligible people who qualify for Medicaid from the rolls. And the estimates are that through two different provisions, about 13.7 million Americans will lose their health care. That is not hyperbole. That's not just a Democratic talking point. That is the Congressional Budget Office.
I was just going to say nonpartisan scoring from the CBO.
Exactly. Nonpartisan scoring from the CBO. So there are two parts to this. One are people who lose their Medicaid eligibility, who are eligible but who can't keep up with the paperwork requirements. And of course, it's ironic because my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are always talking about cutting red tape and, making things work better. They're making things much worse for people who need this assistance. Secondly, there's a provision that came out of the Ways and Means Committee that removes the subsidies for folks who can qualify to get subsidies to participate in the Affordable Care Act marketplace, the exchange, where so many of us get our health care. For some folks who qualify, there are subsidies to help them afford those health care plans. And so they're removing that tax incentive while extending the 2017 tax cuts. So they're extending a lot of tax cuts, but they've made a decision not to include the subsidies that help people afford their health care. And so the total estimate from CBO is that you're going to have about 7.8 million people lose their Medicaid, and then the remainder, another 5 million or so, lose their health care because they can't get those subsidies. So that's a huge impact in our community. And I will say it's going to have a ripple effect for everybody.
And I want to make sure that I got this right. Was I correct in saying this triggers another law that automatically reduces the amount of money that's in Medicare?
You are correct. And that's for a couple of reasons, because the bill, despite the way that it's being pitched, doesn't actually decrease deficit spending, which is a concern for lots of folks, and it doesn't decrease our national debt. They're not making these cuts to programs and services in order to close the gap in the annual budget or in the overall budget. And in fact, the CBO says that this bill will increase deficit spending and will increase our national debt. And the estimates are still out there because, of course, to the process point, the bill has been changing. We got the bill on Sunday night. We got a revised version of the bill on Wednesday night at 9 or 10 p.m. And we stayed up all night and voted at 7 o'clock Thursday morning. So in the dark of night, new updated bill with new provisions. And so the score, folks need a little time to catch up and do the math, but somewhere between $3.8 trillion to $5 trillion increase in the debt over 10 years, increased deficit spending, and it's all to pay for a tax cut. So the Congress, I voted against cutting services, cutting the social safety net, and increasing the debt and the deficit. And because it increases the deficit spending and gets to a certain level, it triggers this automatic provision in what's called pay-go to make sure that you're paying for things as you go. And so the deficit spending increase and the debt increase means that it's automatically triggered, and they're estimating about $500 million in cuts to Medicare. And there are two important points here that I'll make quickly. One, that is cuts to Medicare. Two, the Medicaid cuts will also affect people on Medicare because Medicaid covers folks who live in nursing homes. And so a lot of seniors rely on Medicaid for nursing home care. And so those Medicare recipients will also see challenges there. So those are just some of the problems. And that's when it comes to our seniors and to families who rely on Medicaid and Medicare. But certainly we're going to see a huge impact across the board on our systems and whether without some of those Medicaid payments, some of the local hospitals can keep up. And I've asked about this. I asked in a hearing, what does this mean for the whole healthcare system? And in particular, we have a huge maternal mortality problem here in Texas and in Harris County. And I asked a witness about this in a hearing earlier this year. One of the huge challenges we're going to see is that Medicaid covers 50% of all of the births in Texas. 50% of the babies born in Texas, that delivery is covered by Medicaid. And if those funds aren't there, some hospitals may have to close their labor and delivery units.
Now, to this end, we have an email from Herman who asks, in the big, beautiful bill, how did federally qualified health clinics fare? Herman notes these are health clinics that serve low-income patients, most pregnant mothers and children. Most of these clinics have federal funds through August. Can you update us on that?
Well, in this bill, they're relying on federally qualified health clinics to to pick up some of the slack, and I'll get to one other point on that, without really giving more support. Because what you're going to see here is that so many of those clinics rely on Medicaid to pay for care. And that's the thing that, maybe people don't understand. When you have Medicaid, you go and you get your health care, and then the government reimburses the healthcare provider. So they're paying the clinics, and we know them in town. We have a lot of great federally qualified health centers here in Houston, Legacy Clinic, Hope Clinic in my district. Those are both two of the big ones. There's several others in our district. We know them as essential community partners that provide critical care to people across our community. But they're going to find that if people don't have Medicaid, they can't be reimbursed for that care. And people who don't have care may delay their care, right? They don't go get preventative care. They don't have coverage, so they're not going to the doctor, but they're showing up in the emergency room. And during the debate that we had in our committee on this, my colleagues kept saying, well, we're just shifting the costs. And that's right. They're shifting the cost from preventative care, which is much less expensive, to emergency rooms. They're shifting the cost, but we will still pay them. There's a whole bucket. All this stuff is super complicated. But there's a whole bucket of what we call uncompensated care, people who don't have any insurance who show up at the hospital. The hospitals are required by law to treat them, and then they come back to the government to be reimbursed for that care. So we're not saving money here. All we're doing, and all that's happening, is that this bill increases the burden on people who can least afford this burden.
Katie in Spring asks what efforts you and others are doing to pressure Governor Abbott to, she says, allow us to fill Sylvester Turner's seat. She notes this bill may not have passed the House if we'd, and she's referring to her district, of course, had representation instead of an empty seat.
Well, that's right. As you said, the bill passed 215 to 214 to 1. One person voted present. And certainly we have expressed a lot of concern from the delegation and from the House of Representatives to Governor Abbott that he needed to set the special election in the first place. As everybody probably knows, certainly she knows, he's now set the election for November. The law gives the governor discretion to set the election. He is supposed to set it at the soonest practicable date. And what we have seen is that in the past, when Republican districts or competitive districts have had a vacancy, that election has been set much more quickly. What the governor said was that he didn't trust Harris County to hold an election, which is insane. And we have run such great elections here in Harris County, and our elections office and Tanisha Hudspeth, our clerk, just has done a fantastic job. So it is incredibly frustrating. And it is certainly possible that having someone in that seat could change the bill and could change it when it comes back to the House. Because as you said, Craig, it's now gone to the Senate. The Senate's going to make changes, and it's going to come back to the House. So I totally disagree. The governor should have set the election sooner. At this point, I don't see him moving the election date up, and the candidates are working and running. But it is a huge issue, and it is something we should all be furious about.
We're talking with Texas 7th District Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher. There's still time for your questions at talk@houstonmatters.org or 713-440-8870 as Houston Matters continues. This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. We're talking with Texas Democratic Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher from the 7th Congressional District. You can join our conversation, 713-440-8870, talk@houstonmatters.org. You wanted to mention one other thing about health care before we move on.
Oh, thanks, Craig. Yeah, one of the things, the caller who asked about FQHCs, I just wanted to mention one of the terrible things in this bill is that there's a provision that defunds Planned Parenthood nationwide. And one of the things we saw in our debate is that Planned Parenthood serves 2 million people across the country every year for contraceptive care, birth control, annual exams. It's totally separate from any abortion services, which you already can't get on Medicaid. Now this bill is designed to cut Planned Parenthood out of the loop. And we've tried that in Texas, too, and it is a failure. And there are 2 million people that rely on Planned Parenthood for access to birth control and cancer screenings every year. And so this is a huge problem in this bill as well. And they said, oh, well, there are other providers that can pick it up. What we saw when that happened in Texas is that there aren't the providers to pick it up in every place and that people go without health care. So this is another way of taking away health care from people who rely on and trust Planned Parenthood. And Medicaid allows people to go to their provider of choice. So they're trying to take Planned Parenthood out of the system, and I think that that's a huge problem as well.
Let's take a call. We have Mark on the line from Fulshear. Mark, what's your question for Congresswoman Fletcher?
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. With all the proposed cuts to Medicare and Medicaid, while simultaneously the Consumer Protection Bureau is reversing course and allowing medical debt to be put back on people's credit scores. Medical debt is already the number one reason why people declare bankruptcy in this country. Do we anticipate these changes will force a lot of people to declare bankruptcy in the United States?
I'm not sure that I've seen an estimate on that, but I think that certainly that is a reasonable expectation because it has been consistently a problem. And if you don't have access to the care and coverage, and we're talking about 13.7 million people here losing their coverage, then I think that that is something we have seen in the past. And I think that that is a reasonable expectation. What is not reasonable is slashing the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, right? And so that's been challenged in the courts because the administration has done this unilaterally through the Doge and Elon Musk. And Congress established that as an independent agency. They can't get rid of that agency. It's doing critical work. And again, in the last administration, there's a provision to remove this medical debt from your credit report because it's different than other kinds of debt. And we're seeing a lot of undoing of consumer protections and protections that people rely on and care about coming out of this administration. That's just one example.
Let's next go to Bob in Houston. Bob, what's your question for the Congresswoman?
Good morning, Congresswoman. I voted for you. I really like your proposals and your analysis of the situations that we face here as citizens. However, I do recognize that a lot of the arguments that are put forward by the Democrats simply fall flat. And so I've come to realize that there is a train wreck happening, the taco train wreck, and we've got to let that go on. And I hope that you Democrats have a lot of ammo prepared for when the train wreck actually happens. So you can begin to get people.
I apologize for cutting you off there, but I want to give the Congresswoman a chance to respond quickly to Bob.
Well, Bob, thanks so much for your question, your call. And I think that what's really important to your point is that there are a lot of things happening at once. And I would agree with you that we are seeing huge challenges to the very foundations of our system of government. You see a power grab from the executive branch, from the White House, trying to undermine Congress, trying to undermine the courts. Certainly, it is my objective to communicate about that and to make sure that people know and understand what is happening and why. And one of the huge challenges is that so much is happening so quickly. It is hard for people to keep up. And so to the extent and the more that you can communicate with people and talk about what you're seeing and how it's impacting you and sharing with me as well as with other people in our community how this impacts you, I think it's really important for people to know and understand all of the things that are happening at once.
In connection with what you're talking about, among the provisions in this bill is one that limits the ability of federal judges, the Supreme Court included, from enforcing contempt orders until plaintiffs post a bond, which typically doesn't happen in cases brought against the government. Do you see that as an effort basically to strip away the judiciary's check on the executive branch,
Absolutely.
The president in particular? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what this is. Again, courts have the power to hold people in contempt, and they have different ways of enforcing that. Lawyers and litigants who violate court orders can be subject to fines, can go to jail. And so it is an important power to enforce compliance with court orders. And basically what they're trying to do here is remove the ability of courts to enforce these injunctions against the government. And we have seen courts across the country, judges across the country who have been appointed by Republicans as well as Democrats. I think the statistic I saw the other day was like 92% of the cases the administration is losing in the early stages of getting a temporary injunction or a permanent injunction against things they're doing, whether it is, as we discussed earlier, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau dismantling the Department of Education, which is certainly hugely important, trying to amend the Constitution by executive order by declaring an end to birthright citizenship and calling into question the citizenship status of people across the country, and on and on and on. There have been so many extreme and unconstitutional executive orders coming out of this administration, and the remedy that people have is to go to the courts to stop them. And in this bill, there are provisions to stop those people from being able to do that.
We just have a couple of minutes left here in our discussion. Hurricane season starts Sunday. What are your concerns as we head into it, especially in light of staffing at NOAA and the National Weather Service, as well as calls first to eliminate and then later reorient FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency?
Well, it starts with where you started, which is the staffing cuts at the National Weather Service. We did a webinar last week with the former NOAA administrator talking about what this means. We've gotten a lot of attention, and Craig, I'm so glad that you've covered it here on the show, what it means to have a huge reduction in staff across the country. And in our own Houston Galveston station here, that we have lost the top 3 people, the most senior roles, including the chief meteorologist. We have fewer people who are having to do more work, and we have less data coming into them because I don't have time to get into the overall assault on our scientific research enterprise, but certainly we see that here when it comes to the funding cuts for our research institutions and hospitals and universities. We're also seeing cuts at NOAA and the National Weather Service, for example, like in some places, they're not launching the weather balloons that we rely on to gather data to make the forecast. So at the end of the day, what I've heard is that with less data, with less information, and with fewer people, we're not going to have tailored and as accurate forecasts. And when it comes to hurricane season, we're concerned about making sure we understand the cone of impact, that we have real-time updates. We remember last summer with Beryl, we all thought it was going to South Texas, and all of a sudden it was in Houston. We need everybody there prepared to have up-to-the-minute forecasts and also to be communicating with our local and state officials who deal with disaster response. And then FEMA, a whole other question, but certainly we have seen here how important FEMA is in times of disaster and in the long term. And while there can certainly be improvements and reforms, the way that the administration is handling FEMA, is handling NOAA, is handling these cuts, they're indiscriminate, and it's sort of throwing a million things against the wall, seeing what sticks, making people challenge them, rather than a thoughtful, deliberate approach and understanding of the challenges we face and smart ways to respond.
Briefly, the state's setting up a funding account for the so-called Ike Dike Coastal Barrier Project. What does the future of federal funding for that look like?
Oh my gosh, Craig, I need a whole hour on that. But let me just say, because I know you want me to keep the answers tight. Right now, we have to find other sources of funding. The annual appropriations that Congress can allocate for the Army Corps of Engineers is a third of what that coastal barrier project would look like. It has been authorized. It is possible that we can start seeking funding incrementally, but there is a huge backlog of projects that have been authorized across the country. So one of the things I've done in multiple Congresses is introduce a bill to bring some other revenue streams into the states for coastal resiliency funding. One of them, the RISE Act, almost made it across the finish line last year, and we'll keep working on that to allow the state to get a larger proportion of revenues from energy production offshore, including a whole new stream for offshore wind energy. Because as we have all these conversations about the budget, it's really important to understand that the Army Corps of Engineers has a limited budget and a huge backlog. And so we've got to figure out more ways to get more federal money for coastal resiliency to respond to the impacts that we know of rising sea levels and increased storm season. So we're going to do everything we can to come up with new ways. And certainly I will be advocating for funding to come to our community to make sure that we are safe and that we are ready and prepared and doing everything we can to be prepared for hurricane season and beyond.
Lizzie Fletcher represents the 7th Congressional District in Texas. Congresswoman Fletcher, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Craig. It's always great to be with you.
And just ahead, from a study suggesting AI isn't all that after all to Texas Monthly redeeming Houston barbecue, this week's non-expert panel weighs in on intrigues in the news on the good, the bad, and the ugly as Houston Matters continues. A lot can happen in a week. Some of it good, some of it bad, some of it downright ugly. When faced with intriguing developments in the week's news, we turn to a rotating panel of non-experts to parse the good, the bad, and the ugly of it all. On today's panel, Lisa Falkenberg, senior columnist at the Houston Chronicle, Marco Roberts, chairman of the Texas Conservative Liberty Forum, and Vivian Ho, health economist at Rice University and Baylor College of Medicine. Lisa, Marco, Vivian, welcome to Houston Matters.
Thanks, Craig.
Glad to be
Hi,
here.
Craig.
Panel, AI may not be the panacea it's purported to be in the workplace, at least if a recent study is any indicator. A new National Bureau of Economic Research working paper linking AI use to corporate records finds, quote, AI chatbots have had no significant impact on earnings or recorded hours in any occupation, and that, quote, modest productivity gains combined with weak wage pass-through leads to limited labor market effects due to generative AI. Okay, so the authors of the paper from the University of Chicago and University of Copenhagen find, based on business records from Denmark, that employees using AI tools saved on average 3% of their time. How did they use those precious extra minutes? By working more. Did that increased workload lead to more money? For more than 90% of employees, no, it did not. So according to the study, AI tools are saving a small amount of time, allowing workers to get paid roughly the same to do more work. Is this good, bad, or ugly? Lisa.
Well, I'm not sure on this one. I guess, bad. But I need Vivian or somebody to explain to me how we thought that we would get paid more via AI. I mean, isn't the main point efficiency? You get paid more if you yourself as a human are doing better work, I would think. More, better, whatever. But if the employers are implementing AI, they know that there's that assist there. So why would they pay you more for that? But anyway, and it also doesn't surprise me. I mean, this thing is still kind of an idiot. I mean, you have to check everything it's doing. And I've experimented a bit with it. I mean, I don't want readers to get scared. I'm not, it's not writing my columns or anything, but I experimented a few times, like write this in the voice of Lisa Falkenberg on this issue, making these points. And I find it interesting what it's come up with. But like one of the pieces it wrote didn't even know Trump was president yet, thought he was still running. And so it's not something you can trust. So you're still having to dedicate the time to go back and check the accuracy. It's fun to play with, but in my field at least, I don't think that we're getting the assist that could really make our jobs easier or faster, more efficient, or produce more quality work.
All right. Good, bad, or ugly? Vivian.
I agree a lot with Lisa, and she had some really good points. I had the advantage that I could download the paper, and I didn't read all of it, but, it looked at 11 different occupations, things like accountant, customer service specialist, teacher. And so it doesn't surprise me, when you use these things, I don't find them very useful in terms of making my lectures any easier to prepare or write papers any better. I think they didn't ask the question everyone wants to know, though. They could have surveyed the employers and asked the employer, would you use AI to replace these workers? And that's the question that everyone is concerned about. So you don't care what's going to happen to the earnings of the current workers. You care, are those workers going to be there in 5 years?
All right. Good, bad, or ugly? Marco.
It's really none of these things right now because I think it's too early to tell. So I decided to ask ChatGPT what it thought about this question. And it gave me this very nice write-up with a bunch of bullet points. It was fantastic. Tell me about the pluses and minuses. It even explained why it's not having the effect today. It was great. Unfortunately, human error intervened, and I didn't bring the printout. So that was all wasted effort. It was so...
Because your human brain cannot remember what was...
Well, yes, exactly. So I even went ahead and asked it, is this good, bad, or ugly? And it gave me an answer. And it said, well, here's the good, here's the bad, here's the ugly. And it was very reasonable. And it even gave me a final take. I wish I could remember what it was. I don't remember what it was. So now I'm having to use my organic intelligence, right? So kids, you can't always rely on AI. Sometimes you're going to have to use your own brain. But I thought, what happened to other technologies, right? And so I thought, what happened with the airplane? And it turns out that with the airplane, from the 1914 was the first commercial attempt, but it wasn't until 1939 that an actual profit started being made from commercial airlines. And in fact, that first attempt only lasted 4 months. They closed it down. It wasn't making any money. And then many more years passed before they did it again. I think AI is one of those things where it's still going to be worked out. And I also agree with Lisa. I test it every once in a while. I ask it questions that I know the answer to see what it's going to say. And sometimes it's not quite accurate, right? So you do have to check the notations. But I do find it, like, it saves me time sometimes when I'm in a hurry and I don't have time to do a lot of research. It can give me a gist of something, like what's going on right now. So I think it's a developing story. It is going to be more impactful on our lives. I think there's no question about it. I think the overall picture is good for us because we've always benefited from technological advancement, just like from airplanes. But for now, yeah, I think it's a nothing burger. There's not much happening yet.
The one area I found, actually, I want to correct myself. The one area I found that's really useful is in transcriptions. When I'm doing interviews, but I have this device that I just love and I use a lot. And it also has a feature where it will summarize a meeting or an interview. And it keeps telling me my question asking isn't very good. And I've been doing this for a while, so I'm not specific enough in my question asking. So I don't think it quite understands the psychology sometimes of why you would ask a very open question.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because when I asked it about the airplanes, it says, and this would be a good way to compare to, so it anticipated what I was trying to do. Mm-hmm. And it says this would be an illustration of the development of technology, how it, it increases in application over time. So it kind of guessed what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
Panel, less than a month after an admittedly dubious Yelp listicle shut out Houston barbecue joints from its list of favorites, Texas Monthly came to the area's aid this week with its latest list of the 50 best barbecue spots in Texas. 8 greater Houston area restaurants made the cut, and 1, Truth Barbecue in the Heights, cracked the top 10. The others on the list, Brisket and Rice in Pinkertons in Houston, Corkscrew and Rosemeyer Barbecue in Spring, LJ's in Brenham, and Bar, a BBQ, and Jennings and Company in Montgomery. 10 others earned honorable mentions. Where Yelp failed, Texas Monthly succeeds, and Houston barbecue is redeemed. Is this good, bad, or ugly? Marco.
Oh, I think it's good. I mean, honestly, when is it not good to have the best barbecue, or some of the best places in barbecue in Texas? Although I have to say, just to shout out to my partner, Mike. He does make the best brisket in Gulf Gate area, just letting you know. So next time
is he in the rankings?
He should be. I'm just going to tell you. So he should be in the rankings. He does a good, amazing brisket. I would say barbecue is a lot like flowers, It's like it doesn't matter who you are. You could be a French Marxist or far-right Christian pastor, you love barbecue. And you love flowers, right? And it's something that everybody enjoys. We have a host at Airbnb, and sometimes what people ask us about is, where's a good barbecue place when they come to Houston? Everyone likes barbecue. I think it's great that we have these places here in the Houston area. I am actually surprised it's not as many as I would think for such a large. I think it seems to be lower than our proportion of the population, but I'm not going to complain too much. I did notice that Evie Mays was the number 1 and some town that I'd never heard of. So I looked it up. It's near Lubbock. So, yeah, no, that's what it said. I thought.
No, Marco, you're stealing the thunder of my hometown, Marco.
Oh no, but
you may be maligning Seguin, I believe.
Oh, is that right? Well,
I think this is great. I love my adopted town of Houston, but man, I'm a small town girl at heart, born and raised in Seguin, Texas. And this year, the number 1 barbecue joint in Texas is Burnt Bean in downtown Seguin, Texas.
Well, that's
so y'all
what
need
I saw on the list,
get your butts over there. I mean, I disagree with Marco. I think that if the French Marxist is a vegan, the best thing in the world might not be barbecue for him or her. But I think even that person, if they tried burnt bean, they would be converted.
Okay.
So, and it's got the sides. It's got sometimes you walk in there, the meat is good, but you're so underwhelmed by the sides. Any place that can incorporate Big Red into the mix and some kind of dessert or, street corn, something like this, I am a big fan. So yeah, guys, you're really, if you haven't been to Burnt Bean in Seguin, you're missing out.
You kind of stepped onto the tracks as a freight train was rolling through there.
I think I'm going to stay off of it too.
Good, bad, or ugly, Vivian?
I'm thinking I need to find an excuse to go to Seguin.
Oh, you don't need an excuse. It's a fine place to go any old time, right?
That's right.
Yeah, Yeah, so it seems that it's good because there's so, if you have another list, there's an opportunity to mention more terrific places. Truth Barbecue was in the list, and the problem I have there is they're so popular, I stopped going because twice I've waited in line I've waited for 30 minutes twice in line, and one time actually close to an hour, and then I get there, they run out of stuff. So, what's the point in going?
There is a magic formula, isn't there, of wait times quality divided by grief? I don't know what it is.
I do think there's
yeah. And that so that didn't make it. But, I thought the honorable mentions were nice, like J Bar M, which I discovered only because once I wanted to have barbecue and I was heading over here to record. And when you say, barbecue near KUHF, you get J Bar M. That's a really good place. Fej's Barbecue. Mm-hmm. So I like these lists. The more the merrier.
I kind of like the economics of barbecue, because in this world where we can have everything on Amazon, where everything can be, delivered, and most places in this country don't just run out of things. You get really bad Yelp reviews for doing that. You may go to Europe and they're like, sorry, we're out. We gave you this other thing. They don't do that here. It's not popular. But barbecue places are among the last ones that could say, no, we're out. We made a certain amount. You weren't here. You didn't want it enough.
True.
And so I know people in my hometown who just, Mom, I'm not talking about you, who don't want to go to Burnt Bean because they have to stand in this line. But I'm saying that's what makes it special in part,
Lisa Falkenberg is a senior columnist at the Houston Chronicle. Marco Roberts is chairman of the Texas Conservative Liberty Forum. And Vivian Ho's a health economist at Rice University and Baylor College of Medicine. Lisa, Marco, Vivian, thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig.
The Houston Chamber Choir has been a mainstay in the region's performing arts scene for 30 years now. And after 3 decades of performances at home and abroad, the ensemble's founder, Bob Simpson, is retiring after one final concert this weekend. Simpson tells Houston Matters' Joshua Zinn what he recalls about his arrival in Houston in 1994.
I remember how grateful I was for the reception that I received. Initially, I came to Houston to be the organist and choir master at Christ Church Cathedral, and I started to feel that this would also be a time for me to realize a long-time dream of having a professional choir, of founding a professional choir. I came to Houston just a few years after a professional choir here had folded, the Concert Chorale of Houston, which had been a very fine choir. So when I asked people who knew about the choir whether another choir could function here, I predictably got 2 answers. One was, no, we tried it, it doesn't work, save your time. And the other was, yes, we miss it, please try it. So thanks to the friends that I developed at Christ Church Cathedral, who were my first supporters, and those that I'd met in the community, and the great encouragement of my wife, Mariana Parnas Simpson, we put out a notice for auditions and had some wonderful people join us with the understanding that we would make our first concerts as a volunteer ensemble to show what we could do. And then once we had been able to develop some support, then we would go professional. And those who had been very kind to devote their time and donate their time would be the first core of professional singers. And so little by little over the years, we have continued to attract singers. And I feel now that after 30 years, I'm leaving the choir with the finest musicians, the finest staff, and the finest board that it's ever had. And so I feel very, very comfortable about making good on my promise that the Houston Chamber Choir was designed to introduce professional choral music to Houston and to have it become a permanent part of our cultural life. And I feel after 30 years and the success that we've had that I have achieved my goals in that respect, and now I'm going to follow the continued progress of the choir with great pride and pleasure as Betsy Weber takes over as artistic director.
So you mentioned that when you started the choir, you were kind of filling a gap because this other choir had folded, and so people wanted that again. What was the Houston performing arts scene like in '95? Was it as active as it is today? Were there a lot of ensembles, or were you kind of one of a few at the time?
Well, it certainly was not as rich as it is now, but it was very, very full, and there were a number of wonderful choirs. My goal was to form a professional ensemble ensemble that would allow those who'd had professional training to make part of their income through ensemble work. Instrumentalists graduate from conservatory fully expecting that they're going to be part of an orchestra or chamber ensemble, but singers don't necessarily have that opportunity. And so over the years in America, we have started to develop a broad range of professional ensembles to enrich the choral community, in addition to the wonderful symphonic choirs and community choirs and church choirs. So the chamber choir was designed to do something a little different.
From those first early years, was there a piece or a program that you felt you wanted to be ambitious with, where you were like, this is a pretty lofty goal, but I think we can do this?
Well, in general, my goal was to bring Houston as wide a range of choral music sung at the highest possible level as we could. And we have, in fact, over the years done early music, contemporary music, jazz, indie rock with Iron and Wine. But along the way, there have been moments that I was very, very proud of. It seems hard to believe at this point, but the Houston Chamber Choir presented the first early music or period instrument performance of the B minor Mass by Bach, a performance that David Ashley White, one of our great friends and the Dean of Composition at the University of Houston, called a moment that will change the way early music is performed in Houston forever. Now, when we think about early music, we think, of course, of so many wonderful ensembles. But the Houston Chamber Choir was there first with a period instrument performance of the B minor Mass. We also brought Dave Brubeck back to Houston after 20 years and had a chance to perform with his wonderful ensemble. It had always been a goal of mine to perform with Peter Schickley, who was
PDQ Bach.
PDQ Bach. And we did bring Peter Schickley here, and I have a wonderful picture in my office of his shirt tail out and holding hands up high after a wonderful concert with him.
And number 10, another song from a Shakespeare play, Who is Sylvia? Now, in this case, PDQ leaves the Shakespeare poem the way it is, what he does set, but he adds lines of his own that I don't think Shakespeare would have approved of. Like the first verse is, who is Sylvia, what is she, that all our swains commend her? Boy, do they commend her. Yeah. Things like that.
There have been so many moments, and of course, I can't think about the luck and the good fortune that I've had without also reflecting back on the Grammy win for the Duraflé Requiem recording that we made. Many, many more. And to go on further would just mean I would be omitting even more important moments and people, so I'll leave it at that.
Is there a piece that you've come back to a lot, a favorite piece that you feel like, I want to keep bringing this back for different choirs to sing throughout the years?
Well, there are mainstays of the classical literature. We have done the Mozart Requiem, we've done the Duraflé Requiem, we've done the B minor Mass twice, we've done the Brahms Requiem with a performance of piano for hands. But it has always seemed to me that there were so many other pieces, new pieces that we wanted to perform, that I wanted to perform, that as I look back on it, there are those major pieces that we've come back to just twice or three times at the most in the 30 years. Everything else has been a first-time performance. Mm-hmm. So our library is filled with music that has been used once, and I look forward to its being useful over the years. But most of our programs have been brand new music to the ensemble and to me.
Yeah, well, now I wanted to talk about that a little more about, you said you perform early music, you've performed a lot of the classics, but you also have performed entirely new works by composers who are living and working today. Can you talk about why that's important for an ensemble like yours to be able to do that and perform those works that haven't been heard yet?
Yes. Well, of course, bringing new music to the ears of listeners, bringing music of our day to listeners is of vital importance. And I think we're in a golden age, actually. I don't think any time that I have certainly been active have there been more wonderful composers writing for ensembles. There's a tremendous range of music, and we've been particularly proud of working with Houston composers. We have recorded 2 CDs of music by Daniel Naggs. We premiered works by Mark Buller. Again, the list goes on, but you know who you are if you're listening. I'm so grateful to you. And those that may not have been heard in Houston before, that are not necessarily premieres, but are regional premieres that bring Houston audiences music that they would not otherwise have heard.
Let's talk about the final concert. This will be your final performance with the choir here in Houston. What is this concert all about, and how are we sending you off, basically?
Well, it's called Gather Round, and my concept is for us to gather the family together. There have been 30 years of singers and board members and staff members and friends and supporters, and so the idea is really for us to just have a family reunion. And we will be singing music that we have done over the years that I think is particularly important to us. Again, a wide range of music from Palestrina, marking the 500th anniversary of his birth, to Brahms, to Daniel Naggs, and to wonderful folk traditions, O Shenandoah and Oh Yes, that have been a part of our lives, as well as a very brilliant setting of a text called Never Let Go, which will be our final piece by Rob Dietz, a California composer. A number of these texts have sort of subliminal meanings, and so Never Let Go, our final piece, as an ensemble, will be kind of a tribute to stay with it, don't let anything stop you. And then as many of the former singers as we've been able to gather together will come up on stage, and we will sing together Choose Something Like a Star by Randall Thompson to a text of Robert Frost. And the Robert Frost poem again sums up my belief that, you set your sights and, you ask questions and you try to figure out the ultimate truths of life, not being swayed by those who are either telling you you're on the wrong track or those who are telling you that there's never been anything more brilliant than you. Just staying a steady course, and it's one of my favorite pieces, and I think it sums up my philosophy. And so that will be sung by a stage full of current and former singers.
Bob Simpson is the founder and outgoing artistic director for the Houston Chamber Choir. He spoke with producer Joshua Zinn. Simpson's final performance with the ensemble, Gather Round, takes place tomorrow night at 7 at St. Luke's United Methodist Church Westheimer campus. You can find more info at HoustonChamberChoir.org. Before we wrap up today, I want to note another retirement. Houston Public Media's general manager, Lisa Shumate, is finishing up her time with us today and venturing out to take on a new challenge. You'll hear from her about that on today's Hello Houston, which starts at 11 o'clock. But I wanted to take this moment to thank Lisa for her leadership and guidance, and specifically for her commitment to launch, grow, and sustain Houston Matters over the last 12-plus years. She promised in 2013 that Houston Public Media was committed long-term to the work we do on this program, and she has kept that promise. I and the rest of the team here will be forever grateful for that. Again, you'll hear more about and from Lisa on Hello Houston later this morning. For now, Lisa, thank you and best wishes. And that will do it for today's show. The Houston Matters team includes Michael Haggerty, Joshua Zinn, Brenda Valdivia, Mincho Jacob, and Laura Walker. Jared Carroll's our technical director. On Monday's show, it will be the first Monday of the month. That's when we set aside a little time to sweat the small stuff in a group moan session we call Houstonian Pet Peeves. We do it because you can't tackle life's big challenges, and there are big challenges, if you let the little ones get in the way. So calmly, rationally, or I guess in whatever unhinged manner you deem appropriate, email your peeve to us at talk@houstonmatters.org or call in and join us live on the air Monday morning. I'm Craig Cohen. Have a great weekend and join us Monday for that and other Houston Matters.